A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the endowment lecture that is being held in remembrance of late Shri P.R. Singhvi, a very renowned chartered accountant of the yesteryears. Today's endowment lecture is being organized by the Karnataka State Chartered Accountants Association jointly with the Bangalore branch of SIRC of ICAI. May I now request the President of KSCAA, CA Raghavendra Puranik, to kindly escort and welcome the chief guest of today's session, Mr. M.R. Venkatesh, onto the dais, and also welcome him with a bouquet of flowers. I request Raghavendra to present the chief guest with a bouquet of flowers. May I now request CA Geeta Aryan, the Vice Chairperson of Bangalore branch of ICAI, to kindly escort and welcome F.R. Singhvi sir onto the stage. I request Geeta Madam to present a bouquet of flowers to F.R. Singhvi sir. I also request the KSCA Secretary, Naga Panesur, to join us on the dais. Now over to Geeta Madam for the
dignitaries on the dais, of the dais, special invitees of Singhvi family, senior members, committee members of KSCA and managing committee members of Bangalore branch, my dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. A pleasant evening and extend a warm welcome to each one of you for this special program, Shri P.R. Singhvi Endowment Lecture. First, I would like to inform you that the chairman of our Bangalore branch, C.A. Pampana, is not available here today, but he has conveyed his sincere thanks to Singhvi families and our special speaker, C.A. M.R. Venkatesh, and each one of you. Always, we see that we play a pivotal role in the economic and social well-being of our great nation. Charity begins at home, family, society and nation. Hence, for the growth and development of any country, we have to engage in some selfless service. We the CAs are always accountable not only for accounts work, which we perform in our office, but we are also accountable for our day-to-day activities, and we have to have our introspection and satisfaction, our conscience by words and deeds. At this point, I take this opportunity to recollect the human service rendered by Sri Singhvi and family for our professional fraternity. The patronage extended to our profession by Sri C.P.R. Singhvi and family to beyond our imagination. When we are striving so hard to build the image of our profession, they came forward as a helping hand to serve our profession further. Today, we are all assembled here to commemorate the great service rendered by Singhvi family to our profession. On behalf of Bangalore branch of SIRC of ICAI and KSCA, the entire professional fraternity, we have to remain always grateful to such personalities to recognize their services. Hence, today's endowment lecture is organized. I extend a very warm welcome to C.A. Singhvi and today's speaker, C.A. M.R. Venkatesh from Chennai, and each one of you. May I request all of you to stand up and have an ovation to Singhvi and family, and the eloquent speaker, C.A. M.R. Venkatesh, who accepted our invite in spite of his busy schedule and came here to share his valuable thoughts. Thank you. Let me place on record the ardent efforts put forth by C.A. Raghavendra Puranik, President of KSCAA, C.A. Naga Panesur, Secretary, and Raghavendra T.N., Vice Chairman of KSCAA, and other team members of KSCAA in conducting this endowment lecture. I am very happy to say say that today's topic, what our speaker is going to focus, is on intellectual terrorism, which is very relevant to today's prevailing economic business scenario. So with this, once again, I wholeheartedly welcome each one of you for this special program. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. It is now time to pay our tribute to Shri P.R. Singhvi sir. I request the dignitaries on the dais to kindly join us as we pay the tribute by offering flowers to the photograph that is placed here. Ladies and gentlemen, to kindly rise in silence for a minute so that we can remember all the tributes that have been made by Shri P.R. Singhvi for the fraternity and the economy as a whole. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. May I now call upon the Senior Chartered Accountant in the profession, CA M.S. Rangnath sir, onto the desk and request him to share a few words about today's endowment lecture and about the great personality, Shri P.R. Singhvi sir. Please. M.S. Rangnath sir.
This is an occasion where we remember the contribution made by eminent people of our profession. Today we are having a person who is going to give a lecture on our country's matters. All of us will be seeing him at in the TV. Almost even yesterday also, he was in the TV at discussion about matters. We are very fortunate to have him today. Despite his busy schedule, he was able to accept our invitation to be with us and share his thoughts with us. See, on the dais, we have got Mr. Venkatesh, our fraternity member, and also he has contributed a lot to youngsters to understand what is happening in the country and what he has proposed to think about what is happening and give his thoughts and ideas through TV. And almost all TV programs, I don't miss this talk at you about the subject on which the program takes place. And I am so happy that my own assistant, F.R. Singhvi, is here. He was my article clerk and he passed CA. How he joined our firm is due to his father. His father and myself were very great friends a long time to come. he was one of those persons who was very humble, he was very knowledgeable, and he was always known for less talk and more work, which I have seen him at. And on my association with him for more than about 20 to 20 years at Elur, even when I was doing articles, I used to meet him in the income tax office when I used to go there. And we used to talk with all people with his humility and all those things. The person who never thought that is a very big chartered accountant and he should not talk to others. He was always laughing and talking with people and all those things. He had earned his own name in the income tax department in those years. And his family is very close to my family. Singvi was my student. His brother was a great friend of my son, who is now at the moment. The relationship was so much when the President Raghunath Puranik asked me, why not speak few words about Singvi? I tell him, but it is a great honor for me to speak about Mr. Singvi, who was well known in those periods among chartered accountants. And he was always well dressed, which many people will not do it until you know he will go hanky-panky to sometime to the department. He was always well dressed and used to come and well prepared and used to finish off his case and go. He used to talk with almost all people. And even in the income tax department, people also had recognized him. Yes, he is a personality. In those years, few people were there. Among them, he was one of the person who was well recognized in the department also. See his qualities, his way of work, his way of doing, you must all try to follow, and if you carry on profession, he can also carry on profession smoothly and all this. And his son took the responsibility of arranging, remembering his father, and making his friends to give respects on this particular day. And he has arranged an endowment lecture, for which we are having a great personality to give lecture. We are very fortunate at about this. See, these endowment lectures are normally conducted in memory of some people who have contributed something to the, either to the profession or to the politics, all those things. Even as a matter of fact, I myself has contributed in conducting one endowment lecture at the Institute of World Culture on 23rd March every year in memory of Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia, the great nationalist leader who lived in this country, who died at the early age. Because I was his follower, I conduct a particular meeting every year. This year, if you feel, you can also attend the lecture. This year we want to do it in a big way. You can attend the lecture because he has contributed to the Indian politics to a very great extent. Likewise, Singvi also has contributed. In those years, we had no associations. We used to have some study circle meetings and other things. He used to regularly attend the meetings. Only 10 or 15 people used to sit together and discuss about some sections of the Income Tax Act and other things. Because audit was monopolized by big firms in those years. And others only they were carrying on taxation only, mostly taxation. And that was a very good subject that you for discussion and other things also. Because it depends upon each man's capacity and intelligence, how he attends the work, and how he interprets the law, and how he carries on. With these words, I thank the Karnataka State Chartered Accountants Association to give me an opportunity to think of great Singvi, who lived and contributed to the profession, and also we all in my group who also towards say sometimes we think of the persons who lived in those years, For example, Gopal Krishnan was there, one Jai Srinivasan was there, one Rangaratnam was there. They were all, I tell you, they contributed in those years, because there was no association in those years. Only outwards, only the Karnataka State Chartered Accountants Association was formed. So these were, I thank you very much also.
Thank you, M.S. Ranganath sir, for sharing your words with the gathering and also sharing glimpses of your personal experiences that you had with Sri P.R. Singhvi with the audience today. Thank you. Next, may I request yet another founding partner of SDU, Devraj sir, to kindly come onto the stage and share his words about Sri P.R. Singhvi sir. I request C.A. Geeta Arjun to kindly present a bouquet of flowers to C.A. Devraj sir and welcome.
Good evening, friends. It's a lot of pleasant memories this hall has given me, and after a long gap of time, maybe years, I think I'm in this dais, and it gives me immense pleasure to be amongst you. "57 years is the journey Mr. P.R. Singhvi had on this earth. Very short life. But I haven't seen a person in our profession who was so disciplined, because I had the opportunity of knowing him for from 77 or 78. And he was the founding senior partner of our firm, Singhvi Devamuni, formed in 1980. A great professional, disciplined professional, I can say, and a great human being. Above all, I think he is a great human being. And he had so much of passion for whatever he did, be it in the social field, be it in the profession, be it his family. In those days, as I remember when I started my practice, we had tax rates of 55 to 65%. When I started my articles, it was at 85%. Fortunately and unfortunately, our profession was driven by, I think as Mr. Rangaratnam was saying, that we used to be mainly in tax practice because the audit practice was called by a few people who wanted to spend the time in audit. I still remember because I would still recall the moment, the day I met Mr. P.R. Singhvi. It was after I developed a jealous for his son. F.R. Singhvi and me, we graduated together. I didn't know him at all when we graduated. I happened to open an office next to Mr. P.R. Singhvi's office. I had not met him. And the youngster F.R. Singhvi used to take part in a lot of these activities, which I wasn't. But somehow I said, okay, being a chartered accountant, fresh chartered accountant, I should attend these study circle meetings. Two or three meetings I attended. It was a Bangalore branch with a small office in next to Pallavi Theatre on the first floor. And everybody used to turn back, I think, to Mr. Rangaratnam. Junior Singhvi, what do you think about it? I was just wondering who this Junior Singhvi is everybody is asking for. That's how we came to know each other. And next door, I think he said, well, you come to office. I went, and I would say that the day I met Mr. P.R. Singhvi, I didn't realize that I'm meeting a chartered accountant. He was so loving, so down to earth. Because I knew that P. Singhvi and Company was about, at that time, about 20-year-old firm. I think the only other firm which was senior to them was King Chan Company. He was so loving and he was so caring, and that's what attracted me to him. And we spent a lot of time, and I think the fate had it. We had to come together in 1980. And I had the opportunity of being his partner, guided by him. One thing what really attracted me to him is so honest to his profession. I think possibly his legacy has gone into our bloodstreams in Singhvi only. I won't be wrong if I say that. Those times, as Mr. Ranganath was saying, we have to be in tax practice. This one instance I should tell you. Most of the clients used to come, I want to file my income tax return. What's your income? I want to pay 50 rupees tax. You determine what the income is. I want to pay 50 rupees tax. I still remember Mr. P.R. Singhvi, which FR developed on his own, saying that, look here, I'm not here to file the return based on your requirement of paying taxes. Tell me what is your income. Be honest. I think that legacy went into further because FR Singhvi, I remember telling clients, build a very strong balance sheet if you want to improve your business. This is from 1976 onwards. This is what the slogan I heard from the Singhvi family. At that time, when people used to evade taxes, not avoid taxes, evade taxes, he is the person who used to tell them, please don't do this. It won't help you in your business. And his legacy is continued through his family, and his contribution to society is unimaginable. Still, I remember that when he was talking, addressing the conference, I think way back when he was the president of the KSCA, he talked about ethics and accountability. Then, what we are talking about today, ethics and accountability, then, actually, I tried to get hold of that observation of it. I would like to read out here. When addressing the members, he said, whether in service or in practice, the learned profession is governed by ethics. The foundation for this ethics is accountability. Where there is no ethics, there is no accountability. Where there is ethics, there is always an accountability. Both of them coexist in all learned professions. If we can fully grasp the philosophy of ethics, we would have solved many of our internal problems. Our accountability would remain unquestioned and unquestionable. That's what he is talking about the profession. Nevertheless, one often finds that the demands of society are wide and varied. What is good for labor is not good for the management. What is good for the taxpayer is not good for the tax department. A wide variety of conflicting interests arises, sometimes sporadically, quite often cumulatively. There is no single solution to such situations. Normally, the fact and the principle assist the member of the profession. Suffice it to say that this feature is part of the indispensable burden and occupation of hazard. He talked about, this is exactly he followed his profession. He never taught something and did not practice that, he did. And his legacy, personality legacy is continued through his family, and one such legacy is in the form of F.R. Singhvi, who is a star in the profession, and now he He doesn't call himself an accountant, he calls himself an engineer because he's heading in an engineering auto industry. But his legacy, his principles is completely flown through the genes of Mr. Singhvi, P.R. Singhvi to F.R. Singhvi and to his brothers and sisters. I really miss it for not seeing what his firm has achieved today. And it's great to see that the topic of the day chosen by Mr. M.R. Venkatesh is also something was very dear to him. He said the intellectual property should be within our country, it should be developed within the country and should be retained in the country. Friends, this is P.R. Singhvi for you. Little what I know of him, I just played before you. Thanks for patient hearing.
Thank you, C.A. Devraj sir, for sharing all the good words about Shri P.R. Singhvi sir. May I now request C.A. F.R. Singhvi sir to kindly give his opinion about the concept of endowment lecture for the audience.
Good evening, office bearers of Karnataka State Chartered Accountants, Bangalore branch, Mr. Krishnamurthy, Mr. Ranna, and other friends. First of all, let me say I am very humble, very touched with this activity of having P.R. Singhvi endowment lecture. My boss, Mr. Ranna, said that I am arranging this endowment lecture. No sir, you are wrong. This is being arranged by Karnataka State Chartered Accountants and surprising to me even Bangalore branch. So when Mr. Puranik first called me up and said, sir, we want to have this P.R. Singhvi endowment lecture, I thought there's some mistake. I'm hearing it wrong. So then when he said no, he wants to hold, I immediately said no, it's not necessary. It's not been there for so many years, so why have it now? He said no sir, we still want to have, and I actually refused and disconnected. But he called up again and then he sent a letter. So we really want to have this lecture. So I salute him. He is not here, but I salute him for his persistence with me to have this lecture. Sorry, Puranik is here, sorry. Raghavendra. This saying, see, I'm not intelligent at all. I don't have any memories.
This was the direction given in the AGM, which they have so meticulously followed. Please
hats off to people for reviving this. In fact, this endowment lecture concept was, I was part of this discussion, I think just after my father died, they were discussing this and said, let's have the endowment lecture for the past presidents of PSCA. And that's how it started off. And in fact, first 2 years, the first year I only organized it for my father was Dr. Devi Shetty. And thanks to that lecture, actually I benefited a great deal because one of the comments which I keep remembering almost every day and more so as the age is going, he said, I have a word of caution for all of you. You're all in a profession where there is so much of stress and hard work that you put in, and if you don't take care of health, you are in for serious problem. And that time in 89 or 90, I think 1991, he said the age of human being is only increasing and it could go up to 120 years. And science is not very far that you would have an age of 100, 120 years. But it's for you to decide how you want to live. Whether you want to live a healthy life and not depend on doctors and medicine, or else whether you like it or not, there will be so much of advancement in the medical field that you will be kept alive with the doctors and the medicines and the equipment that are coming in. And I see it now. I mean, so many people would have probably died if not for some of these. Like I'm involved with one dialysis center and I see patients there, and dialysis is a new phenomena that is coming. People would have died without dialysis machines. And now today I see them dying almost every day having dialysis. So this is something that Dr. Devi Shetty cautioned in this very endowment lecture, and I definitely took a cue. I am happy and touched wood to tell you that I am not on any medication whatsoever. The second endowment lecture that we had called was Mr. Dadi, engineer from Bombay of Crawford Vale, who was a stalwart, as one of the best advocates. And he again spoke on profession and where profession is going and how demoralization is happening with the profession and how things are getting blurred between the courts and the government. And I see that now happening on such a large scale. So to me, I think having endowment lecture, to have people, eminent people to come and give, can give you food of thought so serious that it can change your life. It can bring in transformation, and so that's how I'm eagerly looking forward to Mr. Venkatesh on this. I've heard him not so often, sir, but I've heard you, and it's great hearing you again in person. And I thank you once again for two reasons. I thank you. One is for the endowment that is being created. Second, I have to tell you this, and is that Bangalore branch, to a large extent, is something like, if I were to say it's my baby, I would be very wrong. I was with Ramadien and Company. Mr. Rannath, Subrayan, they were the office bearers. In fact, Rannath was the office bearer. But for some reason, the Bangalore branch was just not running. They were there, but they were not running it. And one day they said, we can't run it, you go and start a Bangalore branch. So I was just out of CA, I was the student secretary earlier. So after finishing CA, I met them. I said, what about Bangalore branch? They were very happy to say, look, why don't you take it over? And so that's why they were all senior people who used to be always in the committee, and first time a chartered accountant, 21 years old, becoming a committee member of Bangalore branch at Rajaram Gondra building that Deva was mentioning. And we revived it. It was almost like 7 to 8 years. So thanks to blessings from Mr. Rannath, his partner Subrayan, we took in, and I'm so happy to see Mr. Sachiran sitting here, who was my chairman, the first chairman of Bangalore branch. And from there the journey started. There was no income for the Bangalore branch. So we got in touch with the institute and they said start with grey wall classes. So we moved into JC Road and we started conducting classes, the study circle, papers to be written in the Bangalore branch, and the Institute of Affairs, 1 rupee per student. And that is how JC Road came in, and then of course things moved on. So I'm so happy that I got connected today again to Bangalore branch after many years. Last election I was not in the country, so I didn't come and vote. So otherwise last visits of mine have been only coming, vote in ballot paper and go back. So my last message is, I used to be one of the frequent participants in seminar, more as a speaker, but people seem to have forgotten when we move into industry. I'm always there if they call me. Thank you.
Thank you, Junior Singhvi sir, for sharing your experiences and primarily snippets about Shri P.R. Singhvi sir. May I now request the KSCA President, C.A. Raghavendra Parani, to kindly present the overview for this today's session.
A very good evening, distinguished speaker, Sri Venkatesh, and Honorable Trustee, Sri F.R. Singh, Vice Chairman Geeta, committee members of Bangalore branch and KCA, senior members of our profession, and my professional colleagues, friends. On behalf of Karnataka State Chartered Accountants Association and Bangalore branch of SIRC, I welcome you all for this P.R. Singhvi Memorial Lecture. It gives me immense pleasure in reviving this tradition of endowment lecture after a gap of a couple of years. And on behalf of our association, I profusely thank Singhvi sir for presenting us this opportunity. I candidly admit that I have selfishness in organizing this lecture. Why? I would like to mention 3 incidents which I can relate to associate with the Singhvi sir, both junior and senior. It might be more mere coincidence, but I feel it's worth to mention. Firstly, Singhvi sir, that's a senior Singhvi sir, was 8th president of our esteemed association, and when I was born. So today I am honored to host this event as a capacity of president. Secondly, my career started with a Singhvi sir firm, Singhvi Dev and Uni, which opened my career at Bangalore and has shaped my professional career. So thirdly, being a president of this association, today I am happy to revive this endowment lecture series with the Singhvi sir memorial lecture. So this is the selfishness what I had. So thank you sir for giving me the opportunity, and I would like to share another happy moment. Rather, I would like to announce that the association is completing 59 years of existence and marching to a Diamond Jubilee Association 7th December 2016. So these events always I cherish. Singhvi sir, a man of character, has left behind a rich legacy one can emulate. We deeply acknowledge the contribution to the profession by these two personalities, late Sri P.R. Singhvi and Sri F.R. Singhvi. With these fond memories, I wish to present this endowment lecture. While choosing this topic of the endowment lecture, our committee member Pramod suggested the topic which was delivered in JNU Delhi on intellectual terrorism. It has undeniably been a rising trend to become a critic, rational thinker, I must say intellectual, by maligning establishment, majority sentiments, any kind of majority, in the largest democracy in the name of Article 19(1)(a). So threatened from the government unleashing a crackdown on a particular ideology which decided India's fate since independence. Intellectualism started unveiling its actual undercover face. Recent episodes of making terrorists accused of Mumbai and Parliament attacks, and a Kashmiri terrorist as a national hero, questioning the Supreme Court's verdicts or credibility. The keeping mum on surging terrorism has threatened the very integrity of India, dividing the nation of the lines and terrorism and fanatism. Today's speaker, Sri M.R. Venkatesh, is also affectionately called MRV, has obliged to speak on this raising intellectual terrorism for us. MRV being a chartered accountant but mostly known as a political commentator, and is a prolific speaker on international trade and economic affairs. He has authored many books on economy related matters. Hope you all enjoy this intellectual treat. With humbleness, I thank donor of today's lecture, P.R. Singhvi Charitable Trust and F.R. Singhvi sir, for reposing faith in us, providing an opportunity to organize this lecture. We assure this legacy will be continued going forward. I thank Pampana, Chairman of in his absentia, and Chairman of Bangalore Branch, and Geeta, Shravan, and Bangalore Branch for associating with this program. My personal thanks to Pramod for coordinating this event. Thank you and have a wonderful lecture session. Thank you.
Thank you, Raghavendra. I now call upon the Vice President of KSEA, Raghavendra TN, to formally introduce the Chief Guest and Speaker, M.R. Venkatesh.
Thank you, Shravan. Good evening, everybody. Before I proceed to introduce today's guest speaker, it's my privilege to recognize the presence of past presidents and secretaries of KSEA, past chairman and present and past chairman and secretaries of Bangalore branch, present and past regional and central council members of ICAI, and EC and MC members of both the organization. It's a pleasure to have you all today. It's my pleasure and indeed privilege to introduce prolific speaker CA M.R. Venkatesh. He is a chartered accountant and he is in active practice since 1993 as a partner of GSV Associates, Chartered Accountants, Chennai. He is a commentator on international trade and economic affairs. He has been a regular contributor to various prestigious publications in India. He has authored Handbook on Anti-Dumping, released by former Prime Minister of India, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, in 2001. He has also authored a monograph on capital account convertibility. He has also authored a book titled Global Imbalances and Impending Dollar Crisis, which was published in September 2007. He has also authored a detailed report on farm sector in India in the context of Doha round of negotiations and the aegis of WTO. He has been a visiting faculty of various professional institutions, chambers of commerce and universities. He has also authored a book titled Sense, Sensex and Sentiments in the year 2011. He has recently authored a book on Dr. Manmohan Singh, A Decade of Decay in 2013. This book demystifies the challenges confronting India and Indian economy in the last 1 decade. With this brief introduction, over to M.R. Venkatesh sir. I request all the members to lay back and enjoy the intellectual treat. Thank you.
Mr. Singhvi, Mr. Raghavendra, dignitaries on the dais, off the dais. Good evening to all of you, and pleasure to be in this Bangalore branch, which probably I am visiting almost after 6-7 years. I must confess that virtually I have stopped speaking in most forums for a long period of time. And since it was a memorial lecture of a chartered accountant, I thought I can't say no and I should not say no to it. I must make one more confession at the outset. I understand Mr. Singhvi passed away in 88 and I joined the articleship in 88, so it's very improbable I would have known him personally. I am reminded of Bhagavad Gita, and I am very grateful, Nityananda ji, that you are passed a resolution in the branch AGM that we must raise ourselves and we are responsible for our fall. That's what Bhagavad Gita says. And in this profession where we don't celebrate our celebrated professionals, who will celebrate? If we don't celebrate our own celebrated people. And this profession does not celebrate our own celebrated people. So it is with great pride and joy that I also bow in all humbleness to the branch and the office bearers that you have organized this endowment lecture. Because we as a nation are bereft of role models. And as a profession there is very less. And even if they are, we have secreted them. We have kept them off the balance sheet. We don't want to say so and so is a great personality, so and so has done something wonderful thing for the profession. You know, somehow or the other we want to detach ourselves from the greatness of our own great people. So in this context, I think I must say, sir, thank you very much, because it is a great joy, it is a great pleasure to be part of this particular evening's program, and if the branch has indeed passed a resolution in the AGM to recognize past members who have contributed enormously to the growth of this profession, I salute to them. So when Raghavendra called me and sir, you have to speak on IT, I was really worried. Why is he calling me to talk about IT? Because income tax is one thing that though I practice, I don't speak much. I think I should keep away as a speaker for income tax. Then he said, no sir, not this IT, it is intellectual terrorism. So there's a new IT in town, it's called intellectual terrorism. Now how did I get involved into intellectual terrorism? Neither am an intellectual nor a terrorist, let me clarify. So it is very important that you should think, both of them are more or less the same in this country. This idea of intellectual terrorism becomes a very, very important topic for public debate after the unfortunate events in the JNU campus a couple of months back, where people raise their slogans that Bharat ke tukde kar denge, inshallah, inshallah, and 32 other slogans. And they claimed that they were protected by the freedom of speech that was provided provided by the Constitution. That I will ensure that the nation called India is dismembered, and I have got a right to dismember the country, and that right flows from the Constitution. Can something be more specious than this? Can something be more atrocious than this? I can disagree with anybody, but I cannot disagree with the country. I cannot disagree with the Constitution. I may have a viewpoint, and that the Constitution gives enormous elbow, that all of us can digress, debate, discuss. Probably with Nityanandaji I have never agreed on anything, except today I have agreed something. But I have respected it, and he has reciprocated that respect, love and affection. People who know me Indians say that I will debate for hours together. Debate is not a problem, dissent is not a problem, dissent is essential to democracy. If there is no dissent, all of us are then cheerleaders in a T20 match. Dissent is very important. But dissent from what? Dissent from whom? I can dissent from him, he can dissent from me, we can both have a debate. But can we go and say that we will dissent from the idea called India? Can we dissent from something called the great civilizational state? I don't use the word nation state. India is a civilization state. We are both a state and a civilization. To say India is a nation state born on 15th August 1947, constituted by a constitution on 26th January 1950 is perhaps a simple understanding of the issue. But we are a civilizational state. The word Bharatavarsha is used in several Puranas, several Itihas. That is why to us, the name Bharatavarsha derives from a king who was ruling us at some point. But we want to erase everything prior to 1947, arrange and come about in a clean slate and say, this is my idea of India. And if you dissent, and you don't have a right to dissent, but I will have a right to dissent from the very idea of India which I espoused. Look at the paradox. I cannot say that you please amend this portion of the Constitution. I cannot say that Bharata lived. I cannot say Rama walked in this holy land. I cannot say that Mathura Naresh was Lord Krishna. There is a past chief minister in my state who will say, where is the education qualification? And I will have to provide a university certificate that Rama walked and Krishna talked. But if I dissent, and I can't dissent, but he can question me and hurt my feelings. Can you ever believe in this country the role model of all people is Lord Rama? Rama, not Krishna. Krishna is a role model for professionals. Please understand. Because you can do so many things and get away. But Rama is a role model for ordinary Indians. That is why he is called Maryada Purushottam. And not only in this country, today the physical political entity is perhaps compressed. Perhaps 1,500 years back, up to Cambodia, up to Vietnam, down into Indonesia, Java, Lord Rama was held to be Maryada Purushottam. Today what do? We reduce Lord Rama into a cartoon character and say he is only a mythical character and file an affidavit in the Supreme Court. But if I question this, it is dissent. It is intellectual terrorism. But But if they do it, and they call it as intellectual study of a particular study of something, it goes on. So who are they? The word intellectual is derivative of the word intellect. And intellect means a person who is intelligent, who analyzes facts, figures, who draws upon various understanding of various facts, comes to a reasoned conclusion. An intellectual is a person who goes through all facts, comes to a reasoned conclusion. Today, intellectual means an eminent journalist will say he is an eminent historian. The eminent historian will say he is an eminent writer. The eminent writer will say he is a noted publisher or a noted author. It is a classified, ossified club. Very difficult to break into that club. And one of the important ingredients of breaking into the club is to denounce everything that stood for India and India's pride prior to 1947. Must denounce India for what she stood prior to 1947. That is the elementary qualification for gaining entry into this club. So if you say India had a great history, and if you quote Paul Madison, who has done a wonderful work, and Mr. Gurumurthy ji is doing enormous research on that, one of our eminent chartered accountants. And he says till the 17th or the 18th century AD, India was occupying anywhere between 25% to 30% of world GDP. It is foo-foo. India was always a developing and a poor country. My father studied economics. The first sentence in that book was India is a poor and developing economy. I studied economics, India is a poor and developing. Now my son studies economics, India is a poor and developing. When will we change the contours of economics? And this is how it is being written. Anybody who challenges that is unacceptable. And if you question this, you don't have the eminent economist tag. So you are called rabble-rousers. And if you question it on any field, people will say he is not belonging, he is not authority, he is not given the license, he or his questioning cannot be rational. So you are to be very selective in debunking questions also. You are so very petrified about even questioning you, that you claim to be an authority on every subject under the sun. This is the sign of intellectual presence. That on one hand, you don't want to put yourself to microscopic scrutiny. 5 microscope, even through a naked eye, you don't want to put yourself into any scrutiny. On the other hand, you want to scrutinize every single thing. That Rama's birth certificate must be there, attested by 2 village officers. Rama's education qualification must be attested by Pranab Mukherjee. Otherwise I will not believe he was educated. But when I challenge and question you, the immediate thing is he is a rabble-rouser. What does he know? He is an accountant. He better do accounting. And when you raise questions in accounting, you say he is an economist, forget it. So you diverse him from all sorts of labeling and you make him nirmulam. And then say that he is nothing. But whereas this elite club will scratch on each other's back. So a Rajdeep Sardesai will say Ramchandra Guha is an eminent historian. Ramchandra Guha will say Rajdeep Sardesai is a senior journalist. So you cannot question them, after which there is no questioning about their credibility is established by each other. So you cannot question them or both or either of them. And this goes on. And on top of this, this is the first layer. This is domestic intellectual terrorists. Then you will have foreign certified intellectual terrorists. Arundhati Roy. who writes, is a one book wonder. Who has written one book. And she has, she knows everything. From Upanishad to Bible to Quran to income tax to demonetization, she is ultimate authority. So you cannot do anything about it. So if you question, there's a problem with you. International awards are chosen and given to all these type of riffraffs. Another one is in Delhi. The Chief Minister of Delhi. Now how do you deal with this? This man got Magsaysay award. Now when you have to deal with a subject like this, we have to deal with personalities. I'm sorry, I'm getting personal, don't take it personal, it is a fact. Magsaysay award, and who is this Magsaysay we do not know. But Magsaysay award will give to Beswada Wilson. You know who is Beswada Wilson? That is the latest fellow who has got it. They will choose who can be potential rabble-rousers. And it is being planned. These are the domestic born, foreign, recognized, certified intellectual terrorists. Next ones. So they are slightly, sophisticated. They don't do everything, but they will rabble-rouse in their particular area. So they will not rabble-rouse in all fields like say Arundhati Roy and others. They will do only in one particular field. So you have to be careful about them. So what do? Now look at who is Magsaysay, we do not know. When Shivaji Ganeshan got Chevalier Award, there was huge celebrations in Tamil cinema industry. This country, the moment you use the word global, international, foreign, it will be very timid. We will lose our thinking process. All that you have to use the word intellectual, international, foreign, all these things. Then our country will come to a complete halt. Chevalier Shivaji, the road itself was changed. The name of the road was changed. He is a great thespian. And if you find out who got the award next year, you will be shocked. It was Sharon Stone. Perhaps Nityananda ji doesn't know who is Sharon Stone. Sir, I pity your innocence. Youngsters know her.
I would like to be so.
But Shivaji, we celebrate. Shivaji, ultimate award given by the French. They are not giving it for free. It is given with a vested interest. It is done with a purpose. Then you have the third one. This is the most ultimately dangerous category. The NGOs. The NGO category can devastate anything. They are called tarboos. You know why? They are actually communists. They are leftists. But they suddenly take the plea of environment that is green. That is why they are called tarboos. From inside they are red, from outside they are green. Now these tarboos, what do? They love poverty. No, this poverty is a very big business. Unless you have poor people and keep them poor, this politics does not work. Huge amount of population has to be kept under the levels of poverty so that people will always take the total contract to speak for the poor. Poor are suffering in demonetization. Poor is not telling anything, he is happy, he is going in the road. This fellow, today there are more number of people who are worried about the poor on demonetization than the poor themselves. So they will take wholesome contract, this is not retail contract. We are worried about tribals in Chhattisgarh. We are worried about that plant, nuclear plant coming in this place. And we have got the community backing. Hold, sir. The community will not even know what is a nuclear plant, how a nuclear plant will work. Poor fellow will not know anything. But these fellows will intellectually bombard you and say that no, we oppose, because and the only thing that they will say is Chernobyl. And Chernobyl happened in communist Russia. So absolutism of thought, and that allows no plurality of thoughts, is called intellectual terrorism. That my way is the only way, and it is the highway, and you cannot have any way. To understand how we have culturally handled this is you have to come to Chidambaram. When I say Chidambaram, I don't mean the person, I mean the town called Chidambaram. Because people here know my love and affection for that great person, so they should not mistake. And before I explain how we have handled this plurality of thought, I must also tell you, be wary how to recognize an intellectual terrorism by his looks. He will be mostly moustacheless, fair, halting English speaking, foreign educated, Delhi located Indian. This is the physical characteristics. Now I will tell you how we handled this plurality of thoughts. To come to Chidambaram, there is the great Nataraja shrine, where the Lord is supposed to be in the cosmic dance, and they will also show you a space and they will say Lord is in the divine form, in the cosmic form. They will show Bilba leaves. But that is not the issue. The issue is next to the Lord on the right hand side, you have Govindaraja Perumal Swami. So one set of Hindu believers, mostly Vaishnavites, when they cross this temple to go to that temple, they will put a small towel, and they don't want to look into this Lord and go into that Lord. They don't want to look into this Lord. Accept it. In the same temple, both the Lords are there. How did our forefathers reconcile this problem? They said this problem is in Chidambaram. So they took these two people to Madurai and married one fellow's sister into other fellow, and both became brothers-in-law. Now they cannot fight. Look at it, how we settle the issue that Lord Shiva is the brother-in-law of Lord Vishnu. Period, over. Now you cannot fight. You can do whatever you want, you can discuss whether Vaishnavism is bigger than Shaivism and Shaivism is bigger than Vaishnavism. But the fact is both are in the same family. Both of them belong to the same Hindu and divided family. You can do tax planning for it, you can open a file for them, but they are part of a larger Hindu family. That we always recognize plurality of thoughts. That we recognize that all thoughts are as valid as the other. That we allowed that every single, that is why we never use the word religion. There is no English, no vernacular word that says religion. Ours is dharma, sampradaya. It is your sampradaya to go into that temple and not look into this shrine. I will go into this temple and do puja like this. Let us see how we can reconcile this. This is our wordings are sampradaya. So it is one more sampradaya that Christianity came, one more sampradaya Muslim came, some more sampradaya Jewish came. We took them as sampradayas. You are not seeing God, I am not seeing God. So let us all see which road leads to God. Come. That's all. Mine is the only God. That's never our idea. And the Abrahamic faith, the desert religions have only one idea, that it will be my God and it will be the only God, and the way of praying my God will be determined by me. And you cannot determine it. Even the followers of that religion cannot change the way of praying the same God. That is why today, in the entire Middle East, the problem is with Shias and Sunnis. What is the problem? The problem is they are both agree what is their God. And it is the Sunni way that is held to be the most valid way, not the Shia way. And even in Pakistan, they come and butcher us, our army men and all those things. Inside they are butchering their own people who Ahmadiyas, who are Shias, who are non-followers of Sunni sect. Can you ever believe that this type of thoughts will ever agree? And this is intellectual. This is terrorism born by an intellectual backing, and that is my way, is the only way, it is the correct way, it is the highway, and your way is not accepted. And this permeates through the length and breadth of Indian or the world history. Whether it is market economics, and whether it is the way sociology is handled, or whether constitutions are being framed and democracy is being fashioned. Now let us take the constitution. In 1975, all of us know that the constitution was suspended. Luckily, I did not know much about the constitution then because I was probably too young to understand all these things. But those seniors who are here will very well know that the constitution was virtually suspended. Fundamental rights were suspended. Niran Dey, the then Attorney General, when asked for a specific question in the Supreme Court said, if suppose a man is shot, can he claim a right to fundamental part 3 of the Constitution, life to life? Is it a part of the fundamental rights, and can he claim it? He said, it may shock your conscience, it may shock mine. The fact is, during emergency, part 3 is also suspended. That meant that we entered into a particular model of constitution, of which again Mr. Gumurthy is doing a lot of research on this. And the idea that is coming forward, it is a social contract theory, where all of us, when we are born, we enter into a contract with the state, not with our parents, not with our uncle, aunt, nothing. Brother, sister, grandparents, no contract with anybody, except we have an unwritten contract with the state, that we say that we give our life to the state, and the state not only gives back the right, but also gives us certain fundamental right. This is the social contract. Can this be challenged? Can part 3 be revisited? Not from the idea of what Palkhiwala expounded as the basic structure, but can we say and revisit the constitution and say this fundamental issue needs to be revisited? Constitution is cast in stone. Venkatesh is talking something different. No, I am not talking something different. I am talking about a far liberal way of constructing our constitution. Now let us take some of the issues that is confronting us. Fundamental speech. Right to fundamental speech. Yes, all of us have a right to fundamental speech. All of us have a right to speak what we want, criticize including the Supreme Court decisions. Nobody is stopping us. Nobody is forcing you not to speak. But can we speak against the very constitution and say that the constitution, which is a product of the people of India, that the people of India have to be exterminated? And claim that we are protected by the very ideals of Article 19, that we have got a right to free speech? Questions that are profound. Questions that are so profound that when we have to discuss this, and if you challenge this, the immediate retort is, oh, you are trying to bring in ultra-nationalism. Where is ultra-nationalism here? Ultra-nationalism is not when you respect the constitution. Ultra-nationalism cannot be when you respect your country. Ultra-nationalism cannot be there when you respect your motherland. Today you look at it, those who say freedom of free speech, can they sing Vande Mataram in toto in the parliament with all the security around them? They sing only the 2 stanzas. The last day of the working of a parliament in a session, when there will be hardly 5 people. only in the bathroom. Only bathroom, that's all. You are so afraid to even sing the national song. This is intellectual terrorism. That you cannot express yourself freely. Of the, not something vulgar, not something distasteful, not against somebody, some caste, some religion. No, it is a song that has got us independence. And we are so defensive about it. We are so afraid. Oh, this will hurt somebody, that will hurt somebody, this will hurt this person. Do we have the courage? And quote back the very constitution and say, this gives me. And in the day we sing Vande Mataram in full inside a parliament, then Article 19 blossoms in its totality. Otherwise it is only an architectural beauty inside the constitution. It only embellishes the constitution insofar as words is concerned, and in deeds it is still not effective. Take Uniform Civil Code. Now where is Uniform Civil Code? The debate is, oh, you cannot debate Uniform Civil Code. Why should we not debate Uniform Civil Code? It is part of the directive principles of the Constitution. The Constitution was given with a fundamental right, and they said directive principles, you think about it in future. Please, we don't have time, we have to get the ball rolling, we have to move towards a republic, we have to set a paradigm that will kickstart the nation. The founding fathers said, these are debating points. I would say for here, that I would not accept to the Uniform Civil Code in the way it is being drafted. That is a valid point. But to say I will not debate Uniform Civil Code, and there was a senior lawyer from one large political party who said, if you debate Uniform Civil Code, there will be riots in this country. This is the extent of free speech prevailing. These are the people who come and back. See, 8 o'clock in one channel they will say, no Uniform Civil Code, you cannot debate. In 9 o'clock in another channel they will say, I want free speech. That the speed at which they take 180-degree turns is phenomenal. These are the intellectuals. These are the intellectual terrorists in India. So for 70 years we have not debated this. Please read Article 3 and Article 4 of the Jammu and Kashmir Constitution. How many of you know that Jammu and Kashmir is a separate flag? How many of you know Jammu and Kashmir is a separate constitution? And the word secular is missing in Jammu and Kashmir Constitution. India is a social, secular, democratic republic, but Jammu and Kashmir is social, democratic republic. There is the word secular is missing. In Jammu house, in Delhi if you come, Mizoram house, Tamil Nadu house, Karnataka house, Andaman Nicobar Island house, every house will have the national flag. Here you will have some other flag. It is part of our country. And every inch has to be protected. And that is why we have elected a sovereign elected government. The government has to protect every inch of the territory of this great land. And what do we say? Jammu and Kashmir we will have to debate. With whom? Why should I debate? Why don't you debate whether Karnataka is an integral part of India or not? Why don't you debate whether Kashmir, Tamil Nadu is an integral part of India or not? You don't debate it. Why should I debate on Kashmir? I will debate what is debatable. Not what people say what should be debated. Take socialism. In the aftermath of 1950s, you should read a book also, Commanding Height for the Battle of the World Economy. It came also as a BBC 6-hour video presentation of how world swung from socialistic or the commanding heights that was occupied by the governments in various economies to a more liberal market-oriented economies. Now look at it. Since 1935, we said we will be a socialist country, not from 1945 to 1947 after independence, 1950, 1951, 52, first planning commission, no. Even as early as 1935, if you go through the letters exchanged between Pandit Nehru and Gandhi, Nehru was very clear that we will have to swing towards a socialist model. Where was the debate? Who debated? And socialism was thrust as a huge experiment on this country. And the planning commission members of USSR, then as it was known, visited India. And somebody like Dr. Subramanian Swamy, with whom I work a lot, told me in a very rare conversation that those officers who came from Russia, USSR, told that this model of socialism that you have transplanted from Russia into India will not work in India. And it did not work. And those who said socialism Zindabad till 1991 suddenly became Jai market, Jai liberalization. You would be surprised to know that there was a gentleman called Dr. Manmohan Singh. No, he is a very serious character, no need to laugh. And he was the chairman of South-South Commission, which was constituted by the then Malaysian Prime Minister Muhammad Mahathir. Mahathir is a derivative of Mahathir, actually. Muhammad Mahathir brought this South-South cooperation basically to oppose Americanization, which he called it as globalization. Till 1990, you will never find the words globalization used. In 1990 or 89-90, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was there, he was the chairman of South-South Cooperation opposing globalization. In 1991, he becomes the finance minister and champions globalization. Can everything be more dishonest? And this dishonesty is a genetic virtue of intellectual terrorists. Socialism was buried and marketism was brought into this country. Not as pure marketism, but as globalization. And we all were debating whether globalization was to be written with Z-A-T-I-O-N or S-A-T-I-O-N. That was the only debate in this country, without understanding what is globalization. Today, if you go back, and when the history of 2016 will be written, Brexit, Trump, all these things are clear demonstration that globalization has been buried fathoms deep. Trump versus this lady, Mrs. Clinton. The type of debate that went on, forget it was worse than Jayalalitha versus Karunanidhi, I concede that. But you look at the issues, that protectionism. He not only talks about doing away with the Trans-Pacific Treaty on day one. He says, I will build a wall along with Mexican border. And what were our people telling? This is a borderless world. In one day you will have breakfast in Japan, lunch at Germany, sleepover in New York. This is the new emerging world. People will flow like this. Capital will flow like this. Technology will flow. Only internet flows. Mail will go. People will not go. And today, what has happened? See, the theories that we saw when probably I entered my profession are getting debunked. See, I passed out in 1991. And today all that we read in the last 25 years is becoming irrelevant right before our eyes. We are becoming like unformatted hard disks. We have to reformat ourselves again. And in this, all that was told, capital will flow from one economy to another. Where is the capital flowing? Where is the capital today in the world to flow? If America raises it by 0.25% or 0.5%, the Federal Reserve rate, capital will flow from all these countries to America. Today's Economist talks about, I don't know whether you read it, it says a strong dollar is an impediment to global order. Today's Economist, or words to that effect. A strong dollar is not good for global economy. What does that mean? When you are making a dollar stronger, other countries are going to become pauperized. They will have to weaken their currency. So this brings to the most important question in economics. Why is it that the dollar is the centrifugal force of global economy? What is dollar backed with? Except your faith and my faith, that it is the reserve currency of the world. 1971, August 15th, President Nixon said there is no gold standard from now on. Dollar will not be backed by gold. Previously they said they will back it up to 35 ounces per dollar. Then they released the peg, it went on up to $350. Now where are we? $1,200, $1,300. Now, American dollar is not backed by anything except your faith. But Americans know you have to back it with something else. So then they brought in petrodollars. So dollar became backed by Saudi Arabian crude. So the crude prices were raised. And OPEC was formed in 1972, immediately. And dollar in your hand and my hand was sucked into the hands of OPEC, which is 10-country cartel. And from OPEC, where all countries were under the control of the Americans, it funded the American growth. Who questioned this? The only political leader to question this was Saddam Hussein. He said, you can buy my oil. I will run an exchange. You don't have to go to London and New York, where there is no oil to buy oil. Today if you have to buy a barrel of oil, you will have to go to London or New York. It is like taking Kaveri water from Haridwar. You know, you can go to Haridwar and take Ganga water. But you go to London where there is no oil, you go to New York and no oil, you buy oil. Because that is how Americans have set the oil trading system. He said, I will start an oil exchange in Quicos Island. Let me have all of you, whether it is you, yen, yuan, rupee, potato, onion, anything you give me, take my oil. Weapons of mass destruction. Immediately. And what they did? They hanged him on a Vaikuntha Ekadasi day, morning 4 o'clock, and he went to Swargam. That is what happened. So globalization was what America achieved, finally is that you hand Saddam Hussein on a Vaikuntha Ekadasi. And incidentally, those were the days on which the election results were coming from our institute. Also, you would be knowing it. Counting was going on. So every standard that is being determined, every person who is being acknowledged, every single move that is being, every idea that is being peddled, are those who peddle the very same ideas. Like Dr. Manmohan Singh, who backed for socialism and conservative economy, overturned. They were told, no, you take a U-turn, and now you back for this, and they did it quickly. And there is no questions asked. There is nobody who is putting them on critical scrutiny. Eminent economist means you have to doubt. Senior journalist means you have to doubt. You have to put them to scrutiny. I am not saying that you have to condemn them. Please, for heaven's sake, start looking at it. Now look at our own profession. If I ask a question, which will be the best place to launder money, what will be your answer? Which place is known as the laundering capital of the world? He says Dubai. Anybody? Mauritius. Cayman Islands. Sir, those are all vegetarian places. Jain food.
America itself.
America is not also so much of money laundering. It's London. There is a place called the City of London. How many of you have heard of this? Which is distinct from London City. London City is all we go. It's the capital of UK. We go there. We see the Queen. We see the Buckingham Palace. Everything is there. But inside London there is a place called the City of London. And every bank will have its headquarters there. It is a 1.22 square mile area. You will find the entire picture of commercial capital of London, that is the City of London. Even the Queen of England cannot enter it without the Lord Mayor of the City of London accompanying her inside. That is the tradition. And the nebulous area of the City of London, you must read it in the Google and you will understand it. That's not the point. The point is, IASB is located there. International Accounting Standards Board. Now this IASB is a Delaware-owned private limited company, whose owners are unknown to all of us. And it is creating rules for transparency for the entire accounting world. And we are so happy. International Accounting Standard Board has said this. IFRS, we have to migrate towards IFRS. CPE seminar 6 hours. Certification course 40 hours. Do we ever ask who is this owner of this IASB? It is a Delaware company. America has done one thing. See, all these fellows have kept their European countries. Dutch has got a tax haven, British has got a tax haven, French has got, everybody has got. India has tried to create one in Mauritius, then suddenly Mahatma Gandhi came in our dream, then we said, no, we don't want all these things. So we have our moral dilemma, but if you have to have a country, most of these Western countries have no problem in creating, no moral compulsions, they have created a tax haven. America has created tax haven within itself, it is called Delaware. See, there are 50 states in America, 50 company law, 50 income tax, 50 this, 50 that, one state laws, lawyer cannot go and practice in another state, all sort of complications there. It's a maddening place. They have created Delaware where the transparencies requirement is one of the least. 70% of your Fortune 500 companies are located there and IASB is located there.
One building.
So some of them are in one building also. Some of them have common directors, same steno, same fax number. And they will come here and they will say, we are American company, we are global Fortune 500, we are doing highest level of transparency, all these things, we are New York. We don't stand up and ask them. Arey boy, you are a Delaware company. Get lost. We don't have that scrutiny. That is intellectual terrorism. The moment your intellect takes leave of you, the moment you put your faculty of scrutiny as a chartered accountant or even as a normal person to sleep, accept every nonsense. Otherwise this profession, I am telling you, would not have accepted something like IASB. It is because that we are completely sold out to the idea that if it is foreign, it must be definitely good. It is bunk. I feel very sorry for this. Treasure Island. Please see the book Treasure Island. What somebody has written about that. I went and met the gentleman in Switzerland out of my own cost. Met him. I thought he is going to come in a car. He said, I am coming in a vehicle. He comes in a cycle. I was really stunned to meet an author. And he said, sir, this IASB is potentially dangerous for every country. America has never accepted IASB. Japan has never accepted. Why they have not accepted? This is the type of questioning that we need to do. Not because somebody is entitled to go for 4 trips to London, so IASB cannot become our staple diet. And what is the specious logic? Specious logic is IFRS will bring in more foreign capital into this country. Satyam was IFRS complaint. The biggest advertisement for IFRS is Satyam. So it has nothing to do with your accounting standard, it is the morality of the person. Second, sir, look at, we don't even debate these things. We are adhering to highest levels of corporate governance. Which company says this? Every company says this. Tata's also say this. And it is now my independent director versus your independent director. Where is the question of an independent director being Nityanand is independent director, Venkatesh is independent director? That is how it has been split. Do we ever debate what is corporate governance? Why it was brought by the Cadbury's committee? Why it was taken into India? And how it will be workable in an Indian context? I was giving an interview to CNBC. I told them very simply that you have a promoter. Then this promoter, you don't trust the promoter, you put the money. Then you say this promoter will eat my money. Then you want the independent director to overlook the promoter, who will be his barmate after 6 o'clock, boardmate before 6 o'clock. Okay. Then you say that you should actually not take decision, that fellow will take decision. And if that decision goes bad, he will go to another board and become another independent director. This man will become an NPA and he will not be touched by any banks. Do you have any solution for this? Corporate governance, CPE seminar, rules, certification, potato. We have to go to everything and start doing absolutely genetic. From the genetics we have to start studying. In India, you cannot, the moment we say majority, we presume they are tyrannical towards the minority. Majority shareholder means minority shareholder ka kuch kharab karega. Simple, assume. And the solution is, if this is the problem, let us look where, Google it. France has got something, take it out. Sir, it is a French model we have studied and we have brought it in. Where it is applicable? In America, there is no promoter. Companies are promoterless. In India, barring some 4 or 5 companies, everything is a promoter-driven company. You may like Mr. Mistry may not be liked, but the promoters are Tatas. It is a Tata enterprise. I am not going into the issues, let us be very clear. I am only saying the promoter is Tatas. Now they may like something, they may dislike something. The actual ways of strengthening that whole mechanism between minority shareholder and the majority shareholder is operation and mismanagement. Not get a third party interloper into the board and say this will be the solution. Independent directors in this country are as independent as a husband from his wife. We are independent, we have got independent, there may be some few people, but tell me, in which case has a fraud been highlighted or something very substantive issues have been raised by independent directors? This charade is going on. And somebody has to put up his hands and say the emperor is without clothes. We are not doing it. And we are certifying also. So the point is, a society where scrutiny of most issues don't happen at the genetic level is bound to become a society or an economy or a country or a nation where you take the head of a rat, body of an elephant, tail of a deer, horn of some buffalo and create an animal. That is what we are becoming. That is the intellectual terrorism's effect on our country. That we refuse to think on anything. We refuse to debate on anything. We refuse to accept anything that is indigenous. We refuse to put to critical scrutiny of anything that is presented before us. That is how intellectual terrorism has finally evolved in this country. That we are completely bereft of even the average thinking that a normal person should be doing on simple scrutiny. How else will you explain all these things? That this is happening before our eyes. That this is happening right and the evidences are there, and these are all standard operating practices of the outside world. Create somebody, give him an award, make him a big man, say he's a great personality, intellectual, he is being called here, awarded here, international conferences he has addressed, widely acclaimed, and you go and talk to him, you will find that he is vacuous. And is this man, how many of us have ever read that God of Small Things? Can somebody put up the hand? None. But if I say Arundhati Roy, you will always accept she is a widely acclaimed writer. That is the problem with us. We don't put that, I am not saying she is not entitled to write. But one novel, why did she get? And what did she do after that? She has become a potential dissenter. A perennial dissenter. A potential dissenter is converted into a perennial dissenter after Booker's Prize. There is a guy called Noam Chomsky. Have you heard of him? The intellectual terrorists don't want you to also dissent. So the dissent part is also given to an intellectual terrorist. So he will also oppose that, and he will always oppose. So to oppose anything will also be done by one within the gang. And it is Noam Chomsky in America. And Noam Chomsky will oppose everything. Now these guys are like a clock that has stopped working. And it will show 2 right times every day. They have that much utility. So they will say, look at 3:15 I showed you the right time. So people will say, yes, correct. Potential dissenter, perennial dissenters. There is no that they will never say yes to anything. They will go on opposing. And why do they oppose? You do not know. They do not know. Nobody knows. In Calcutta, the most famous word is Cholbena. Kyon Cholbena? Nobody knows. But the average Calcuttan, especially when I studied in Calcutta, so I can safely say this, that the default position is Cholbena. Why do you take that position? Because you always want to dissent on something and you never want to give that, even that dissenting space to somebody else. The genuine dissenters will never be given a space so that the original dissent is also hijacked by these people. Can you ever see that the bun will be organized by the left front and the left front is ruling? So that you don't carry the bun. Suppose you are successful. So I will do the bun. I will determine what is right. Whether it is sociology, politics, economics, accounting, any judiciary, any standard I will determine. I will determine what is good for you, what is bad for you. If you follow, better follow. If you don't follow, you are whatever you are. So we will have absurd theories. We will raise absurd questions. We will hurt your feelings. We will foo-foo your faith. It's all immaterial to us. But when you start doing anything to us, for instance, if I say, and I did say to one of my good leftist friends, that Karl Marx was anything but an economist, he got wild. He said, how can you say Karl Marx is not an economist? His theory, Das Kapital, was the ultimate. And I said, sir, today leftists are found in 2 places, one in burial ground, one in museums. And you are one of those rare museum pieces, you should go and sit in a museum, I should collect 10 rupees to make people see you. But that pervasive thought that we have the ultimate knowledge in any field, that we are absolutely beyond question, we are absolutely supreme, that even the non-believing God cannot come down and ask us any questions. They don't don't believe in God. Most of them are atheists also. So even if the non-existent God comes and questions us, we have surpassed and we can answer all those questions. That is intellectual terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you all given me a very patient hearing to a largely difficult topic. I should thank the Bangalore branch once again, because these subjects are still being in embryonic stage even in my mind. But these need to be spoken. And probably I was really stunned, because in these days of demonetization and GST, what has happened to Bangalore branch that it is coming? I was really at KSCA whether you have done the right thing by organizing this lecture. But once I came to know of Mr. late Singhvi, I only have faith that these type of subjects need to be debated openly, fearlessly, without any inhibitions or any hatred towards anybody. We must expose them at the same time, must have love for them. Because they are doing it because of sheer ignorance. Most of them are cheerleaders for foreign powers, who get their loyalties are with forces inimical to India but outside India. They talk of peace with Pakistan when just then the Pakistan would be shooting a couple of our soldiers. Because they are all in the payrolls of ISL. It's as simple as that. If their, God forbid, their own children are being shot, they would not be speaking like that. But they have been told to speak like that. They have been told to uphold Marxist values. They have been told to uphold market values. They have been told to be cheerleaders for this ideology or that theory or this particular standard. I will say one thing if I close. And you can Google it, youngsters can see if it is correct. That the space between two wheels of a spacecraft, there is a standard for it, comes from the space between two wheels of a chariot wheel in the Roman Empire. Once a standard is set, once a benchmark is created, once a particular idea is implanted, it is very difficult to do away with it. It goes on for centuries, it goes on for millennia, it goes beyond civilization also. So the counter to it is, we have to create standards. I am not talking about accounting standards alone, because we don't seem to create one. Despite that's a very tragic thing that we have 2 lakh people, but we are so keen to follow. Followers can never be creators. Those who rebel and create are only going to create newer benchmarks, newer ideologies, newer standards. It is not that the other standards are bad. All standards are not bad. But all standards, before they are declared good, must pass your critical scrutiny. That is my humble prayer. Please see who is creating the standard. Why is that standard being created? What is the effect of the standard on us? Don't declare any standard to be good just because they are from some country. Youngsters can do a research on IASB for starters. I leave. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, M.R. Venkatesh. Over to F.R. Singhvi sir for his comments.
Sorry for coming again. I decided I would not speak about my father, but Mr. Venkatesh's talk brought in certain aspect of my father which I thought I would share. He talked about debate, he talked about constitution being suspended, he talked about being fearless, he also talked about being with Subramanian Swami. So all this connected was that during emergency time, there was no Janata Party at that time. It was Jan Sangh. And the combination of this party, what Janata Party was done in my house. 78, there was an emergency going on in the country. The meeting used to take place in my house through RSS connection of my father. He was there since 47, went to jail in 47. And then he was fearless that he believed in this organization. I do have reservations, but he believed it. Whatever he believed was very staunch and fearless. So the meeting used to take place in my house. And the last meeting was, I still have the photograph of Mr. Vajpayee, Mr. Subramania Swamy, Mr. Deve Gowda, and Mr. Advani, all four of them, having what we call as a debate. I would say that I was part of that on the dinner table as well as hearing to their comments, and that was really a debate about how the country should go forward and how all of them have to join together, and that was a historical meeting after which Janata Dal was formed. And Mr. Vajpayee stayed in my house for 2 days alone. He didn't want to be disturbed. He said, "We have discussed about the strategy. I need to work on it. So please allow me to stay with nobody coming in." So it was me taking care of his tea, coffee, and he was playing with my young daughter who was 2 years old or 1 year old. So that evoked memory of mine of my father's doing in all this, and that is what he was. The other aspect was just that fear, I think, is like Devdas said, a lot of his good qualities have come in. I have never feared, and anything I have gone to, and strikes takes place in my work, the first time that we did, I walked into the colony and said, "Okay, who wants to have a discussion with me?" And that was the last strikes and said I had. So I thought I'd share this movement, which I felt very proud when Mr. Venkatesh was talking about intellectual pluralism, that I was witness to something, debate, a rare commodity, but that does give results. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singhvi. Over to Naga Paneswar, the Secretary of KSEA, for the formal vote. Thanks.
No Q&A. No Q&A.
Dear members, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Bangalore branch of SISF ICI and Karnataka State Chartered Accountants Association, it is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks to this August gathering on account of Sri P.R. Singhvi Endowment Lecture. Firstly, I thank Sri F.R. Singhvi, donor trustee of P.R. Singhvi Charitable Trust, for consenting us to conduct this endowment lecture and making it a more memorable one. As a token of gratitude, I request C. Raghavendra Purani, President of KSEA, to present a memento to Sri F.R. Singhvi. Secondly, I thank C.A.M.R. Venkatesh, who has come all the way from Delhi and delivered his lecture on intellectual terrorism on this occasion. As a token of gratitude and appreciation, I request C.A. Geeta Adhyam, Vice Chairperson of Bangalore branch, to present a memento to C.A.M.R. Venkatesh. Before proceeding further, if you have any questions, you can just take it.
Mr. MRV, what are the distinction between intellectual dishonesty and intellectual terrorism? That is number one. And how deep this intellectual terrorism has got into the judiciary?
Intellectual dishonesty is when you know something to be wrong, yet you don't speak the truth. This is intellectual dishonesty. when you do it for a fee, it becomes terrorism. That's all. Most of our Delhi-based people, in terms of trying to impose themselves as the true torchbearers of liberalism, are people who don't even have the moral fiber to take one criticism in Twitter. These characterless people cannot take, criticism in 140 characters. And they come and pontificate about liberalism, about values of this country. They take the complete field and they say, we speak for the country and its values and its idea. That is the problem. And your second question was judiciary.
Judiciary and intellectual terrorism.
Sir, judiciary, unfortunately in this country, has not been put to the type of scrutiny in any advanced democracies as it should be.
Yes.
Without mincing words, let me tell you that the quality of the judgments, especially in some of the specialized areas like taxation, like you will say FEMA, or some of the specialized laws, I find the judges are finding it very tough to cope up with the changes. To put it very mildly. To put it very bluntly, they are behind the curve. But this is not intellectual terrorism. The problem with it would be that the day I am standing and criticizing a judge fearlessly, without any fear of retribution through the contempt of court act. Till day suo moto asks the government to withdraw it. The suspicion always remains that no criticism is possible. And that gives a shade of intellectual terrorism, but that is not intellectual terrorism per se. Intellectual terrorism is sponsored. Whereas these people are not sponsored, they are only ignorant, and through a law, we are unable to criticize them. That's all.
I hope there are no questions, further questions. Yeah. I also thank all the senior members present here, in particular CA MS Rangnath and CA Devraj D, who remembered late Sri PR Singhvi on this occasion. I also thank the chairman, executive committee members and staff of Bangalore branch for joining hands with KSEA in organizing this endowment lecture and providing this wonderful hall. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank each one of you for your active participation in this endowment lecture and making it a memorable one. Thank you all. Good night.